the fine art world is so removed from the public, and so many people feel like they can't participate in it. Often, either they don't have the finances to become a collector, or they don't feel like they have the taste to understand what is good necessarily. And public art just gets rid of all of that. And it's like, no, this is for the community. This is for whoever happens to walk down the street every day, and it can become a part of their daily landscape. And I think that that feels so powerful to me because um, I think that that's how we reach the artist that may have never been an artist otherwise, or the creator that can change things for the next generation or start conversations and share perspectives that otherwise wouldn't have been given like a chance.
Welcome to Therapy for the World, an interview series exploring the personal stories of people working across the spectrum of self-care and world care. I'm Dan Sikorsky, a writing teacher and therapist, and the other voice you hear is Sofi Rami. Sofi is a first-generation Colombian-American artist and explorer of the human experience. She especially works in the field of public art, large-scale murals and installations that are visible in everyday spaces, turning walls and streets into places of connection and imagination. In both her public projects and her private studio, Sofi uses acrylics and spray paint to create dynamic, abstract, and dreamlike landscapes. Her pieces weave together personal narratives, cultural heritage, and a strong foot in the natural world. In this conversation, we talk about her history and inspiration as an artist. She reflects on how the fine art world often feels inaccessible to the public, and how public art can serve as a democratizing force. She shares her earliest influences, the emancipatory experience of painting live at events, and the ways she involves communities in her creative process. We also explore how her work engages with themes of mental health, cultural heritage, and the broader social responsibilities of artists. We recorded this on Tuesday, August 19th, 2025 at 2 in the afternoon. Here's our conversation. Sofi, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'd love to start off by asking you, as we tend to, if you can point to something in your early life, in your childhood, in those earliest years, that you think helped shape the person you are today.
Hi, yeah, it's so good to be chatting with you. I love this question so much. I think that it really reminds me of the wonderful example that I had by my mother. She's an entrepreneur, and a huge reason why I felt like I could be crazy enough or able enough to pursue my own business as well. She's an architect and was the sole breadwinner for our family growing up, and supporting a family of five, and getting to see her value creating beauty in spaces and the resilience of what her position had her go through and overcome throughout her life in order to maintain for us as a family, and also develop her own identity and her own experience as a woman, was an incredibly impactful thing for me to watch growing up. And yeah, I think that I always knew that I wanted to be creative and create in my own way, but for many years I didn't know what that would look like. I just knew it wasn't going to be exactly how she did it. And then outside of her example, I would say probably in about middle school is when I got my first real like encouraging feedback from a teacher in terms of art. And I was included in an honors art program. And previously, having only spoken Spanish at home, my early education was really difficult. Like, I had to do a lot of tutoring. I had dyslexia. I didn't feel like a lot of the subjects in that transition just came easy to me. And art was the first place where I was really celebrated for that innate talent. And I think that, yeah, that my middle school art teacher was definitely formative outside of my mom, the two of them.
That's lovely. What kind of projects were you working on in middle school? Do you remember those?
Yeah, I actually remember one so specifically because I think it just filled me with so much confidence and pride. It was this triptych, like a small three-panel painting of butterfly wings, but I did these like abstract washes behind them and then really graphic line work on top. And it was like a butterfly in the different stages of flying going across all three. And I think that yeah, that project has always stayed with me, like the level of control. And now looking back on it, like I think this is the first kind of realization I've had because I haven't thought about this project in a long time. Um, it it displays two techniques that I have like kind of really described eras in my art, like a very graphic approach to art versus a very soft edge, fluid approach. And that piece had both of them, which is really interesting.
What are those two approaches? I would love to visualize them a little bit more if we can.
Yeah. So, like thinking of pushing pigments and blending gradients in a really soft edged way where it feels almost like tie dye in a sense, where everything is just amorphous and kind of blending with one another. And then graphic would be like the line work that I used, which was on top of that kind of abstract colored background, which is very like clean edges, like almost digital in its representation. Um, and I leaned very hard into digital art for a period of my life, especially during undergrad, and then more recently, I've leaned into the softness a little bit more and marrying both and finding that balance. I think is where my best work is.
I'm so in awe of people who, beyond creating art, can also speak about it in these terms. To have the vocabulary to describe such visual elements, I
Mm,
think is difficult.
yeah.
Probably it's something that one is taught in art education, but in any case, to speak beautifully about art, to make art of one's words in that way is a talent. So we were talking about childhood and like how art kind of had its start there. What was it like for you to decide in over those earlier years that you wanted to dedicate yourself to this?
I think that I didn't really make a choice. I just until I was like trying to decide where I was going to go to school. So at the end of high school, but throughout middle school and high school, and I was really just creating for me. I think it was a way to like process a lot of emotions that I had and trials that I had during that season of my life. And I didn't I didn't have a whole lot of examples telling me that it could be a career until I actually got into like the electronic music scene in the DMV area, and I started to see people do live painting at concerts, and I became friends with some of the folks that were doing that, and they were like a few years older than me at the time, and just really showing me that like you don't have to just be a starving artist, that you can really find niches and ways to tap into community that will really be supportive of art. And I think the music scene and is one community that really does commission a lot of artwork, whether it's for album art or live art or installation work at their events. And so witnessing that happen and that level of collaboration from multiple different parties was like, oh, okay, I can find a home here. And from there, I just started doing it for fun and to tap into that community. And it just like it became a natural progression of getting opportunities where I can actually monetize my artwork outside of just selling canvases, but as like a performance. And then I think that's what gave me the confidence to transition into murals because I'd been painting in front of people for years.
Wow. I never thought of it as a performance. It shows how little I know about this world and how important it is to come in contact with it and touch with it in the way that you were at those electronic music festivals. What does it look like to perform a mural? What does someone see as they're watching you do it?
Yeah, it's so vulnerable. I have now found like peace in that performance aspect. But initially that was like the biggest hurdle, was just being as my craft also was developing, in those early years, like I just wasn't as good of an artist back then. And so there was a longer, what I call like an ugly phase, or an undiscernible phase of the art, where people are like, what is it? Like, I don't know, where they're making their assumptions and it's like not what you're trying to paint at all. Which can be a little discouraging if you're like mid process of trying to like develop something out. But yeah, I think that a lot of the performance side of it is talking to people about what's happening so that they can kind of understand, and also listening to them, because I think when people see you performing live art, they immediately start to draw on their own experiences with art, and maybe like the discouraging or unsupportive people in their life that made them feel like they couldn't do art, or the people that were very formative for them, or just their insecurities around the subject often come out. And so I think there's a lot of like um willing emotional labor that goes into it that I think is unseen. But there's some really beautiful moments of human connection that happen there, if someone's really willing to take the time and sit with you. And sometimes people will just camp out and watch me work for a few hours of the night, and then they'll meander off and they'll go back to the stage, or sometimes I'm positioned right next to it, and so they can watch me and see the show. It just depends on where the venue puts you, but yeah, it's very much just, I used to go in with completely fresh canvas and start and try to get it to a relatively close to finished stage. But now I like to go at like a halfway point and then get as much as I can done. Sometimes I'll bring canvases across three events, and they'll travel with me as I'm doing it all summer, and because I like to take my time a little bit more. And that pressure has also been relieved after like so many years of doing this, where I feel like I need to deliver something. Most of the time it's just, I'll bring like some finished pieces on the side, and I'll do a little vending scenario where people can see what it will end up like. But yeah, I just try to let people in a little bit into that experience and what it looks like to be in progress.
I like the theme that comes up there of things becoming easier with time, which is something we could probably say about any career, that you are initially super stressed about an activity, an action, especially when when it's performative, when it's public, and it becoming a little bit easier with time. I can definitely relate.
Yes.
You were drawn pretty early on then to public art, to murals.
Mm.
What do you understand by public art and by murals? What role do they serve in the spaces that they take up?
Yeah, I think that my biggest draw to public art was that it is, in my opinion, the ultimate democratization of art. It really breaks down all these barriers. Like the fine art world is so removed from the public, and so many people feel like they can't participate in it. Often, either they don't have the finances to become a collector, or they don't feel like they have the taste to understand what is good necessarily. And public art just gets rid of all of that. And it's like, no, this is for the community. This is for whoever happens to walk down the street every day, and it can become a part of their daily landscape. And I think that that feels so powerful to me, because um I think that that's how we reach the artist that may have never been an artist otherwise, or the creator that can change things for the next generation, or start conversations and share perspectives that otherwise wouldn't have been given like a chance. And I think it starts from like witnessing public art or seeing that.
One of the projects you worked on recently had as partners in the process, we could say kids, neighborhood, the youngest people in a community. You worked on a project called the Hill Manor Sidewalk Project. Uh, what was it like there to work with these kids, and what kind of conversations were you having with them around this?
Oh man, that was one of the most challenging and even more rewarding projects I've ever done in my career. I was brought out by Sprocket Mural Works, which is a mural festival that has been in Harrisburg for a very long time. They have, I think this year they installed their 100th public art project. And we did, I believe, 7 in the Hall Manor community. And I was the only ground mural and their first ground mural ever. So I really am grateful that they trusted me with that and allowed me to kind of show them what the technical side of executing something like that looks like. It was a huge success. We had to install during a heat wave, which was what made it very difficult because when you're painting on the ground on concrete, you're just exposed. And covering that large of an area, like we had easy ups and stuff to create shade in certain areas, but you're pretty much out there in 103-degree weather. I tried to start earlier. I was starting at like 5 a.m. and would finish around 5 p.m. And I had about 5 to 6 adult volunteers throughout the week. And then we did a Boys and Girls Club activation where I had a dozen kids. And I will also say we had probably 3 or 4 kids from the apartments that were right along the sidewalk that would just come out and hang out with us throughout that whole week too in a more informal way. But they always wanted to paint for a few hours and I would find something for them to do and they were wonderful. The Boys and Girls Club kids were so excited and just like eager and joyful about not just the mural that we were working on, but all the other installs that were happening. And they got to work on another project as well. And I was really grateful because it was a little bit later in the install. I would say it was on our 4th day, and we did it across 7 days. We did 4,000 square feet, which is my largest. I honestly was biting my nails a little bit at the beginning of the project, worried about if it was even possible to cover that much square footage with that much time, given that we had a couple volunteers locked in, but the rest of it was like whoever shows up, and there's a chance that like the community could be busy or just uninterested. And so the turnout and the fact that people wanted to show up during the heat wave and sit in that environment with me and do that hard work with me just gave me so much energy to show up and be my best self for them. So I'm really grateful for that. I think that they really were my fuel throughout that week. The kids were with us for a few hours on that 4th day, and they blew through the work that I had prepped. So normally when I work with kids, I try to do like a paint by numbers kind of scenario to make it really easy, especially with kids that are like 4th grade or lower. They have less dexterity in their hands, and their ability to deal with like pressure control is just not fully there yet. And so having like a large area for them to just fill color, and then I'll normally edge it so that that clean edge is already there and they can just go in and kind of be free. And I don't have to, I don't want to take the joy out of the painting for them and be like overly, policing their technique at that stage. I just want them to feel free with the pigment and leave the experience feeling like, oh, I could do this again. Or I want to like, maybe it'll develop into a creative career for one of them that they didn't envision beforehand. But being in Hall Manor specifically was really moving because this is a community that has a lot of hardship and a lot of marginalized identities coming together, but also one of the most beautiful examples of like community out of necessity that I've ever witnessed. And I wasn't prepared for it. It like was a very emotional thing to witness because especially now, like in the United States, the late capitalist society that we live in really divides people into these nuclear households of suburbia. And there's a lot less of this like radical community. Like if your neighbor needs something, you'll help them out. If somebody needs childcare, you know that the woman two doors down will take care of your kids and that kind of thing where people are like out in these common areas just really engaging in life together. And I had so many stories shared with me about what that looks like for them and different trials that the community had gone through. And they were so open with me about that. And I felt so honored that they felt safe to talk to me about all the things that they experienced. And even when people had didn't understand what was going on with the murals, because they have a lot of issues in their buildings and different utilities that aren't working, or their pool houses has been closed for months, and these different things that they wish would get funded and fixed. And then all of a sudden they see these 7 murals come in and take up space. And they're like, well, what about all of our problems? And they don't understand the pipeline of funding and the legal bureaucracy of it all, and like the grant that was funding this project being for community nourishment, and it couldn't be for any kind of utility aspect. And so being able to have those candid conversations though, and hear their concern, I think was really valuable. And I think that that was a wonderful thing that Sprocket did really well, is really integrating community feedback into the whole process. Like every single artist did 2 designs. And about 2 months before we started install, they hosted like a pizza party for the community where they had everyone come and place their votes on which of the 2 mock-ups they really enjoyed, and then notes on both of them if there was still something that they wanted to see more of. And so that kind of input really allowed people to self-identify with the projects a little bit more and not feel like this was like some gentrifying organization that just came in and took a bunch of space and resources from a community that really needs resources. But instead, they started to see it as, oh, this is going to bring media coverage and the ability for our voices and our community to get a platform so that then we can get those needs met in the future. And that this is the beginning of hopefully a greater spotlight on the Hall Manor community, because it is so full of life and so full of so much potential. Like I had the most incredible kids with the best attitudes from the neighborhood, not just the Boys and Girls Club, that were there throughout the week with us. And they helped me from anything to cleaning my brushes to making sure people stayed off the wet areas, because that was definitely something that was probably one of the trickier obstacles when you have 4,000 square feet that is at different stages of being wet to try and keep people off of it. But, respectfully, and also like reroute them in a way that makes sense for them, or help them if they have bags or a cart or whatever, cross safely. Yeah, they were just, I couldn't have done it without them, honestly.
I can tell it was a moving experience because it opens up so many areas of inquiry for me.
Yeah.
Starting with the collaborative element of the experience.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty type A person sometimes, and I can just imagine being quite stressed at the mural not coming out exactly as I envisioned it because there are other painters in the kitchen, if you
Yeah.
will, right? But it sounds like you were able to surrender that pretty well, to by the paint by numbers, for example,
Yeah.
or by maybe just deciding surrendering peacefully to the fact that it was going to be a group effort and it was going to be for this community too. So love that, love that. Uh,
Yeah.
One of the topics we were talking about earlier before off the air is the conversation that happens with a new client or community when you're brought on to the team, right? When you're brought into the community, into that area, onto that wall, whatever it is, and they know they want something there, but it's not really clear yet, perhaps, what it is that they want there. What does that conversation look like? What do you see your role as in that decision process?
Yeah, I think that when it varies, sometimes the project is very much like, okay, I'm delivering something, they have a vision, this is very specific. Like normally if I work with a school, there's a lot of parameters around what can be included. Oftentimes their work, they want me to deliver something that's very specific to the ethos of the school or their brand, whether they have like mascots or, and it kind of becomes like very tailored to their identity. And I'm very much just a vessel in that sense. Um, And other times I have the luxury of people being like, I don't really know, but I trust you. And so go crazy. And those are selfishly some of my favorites, but I do still get a lot out of the other kinds, where it's a little bit more structured of a vision. And if someone lands a little bit in between, then I think I just have a conversation about their values and what the goal is for this. So sometimes there are parameters that are outside of even the client. So, like if a mural festival that is using tax dollars is commissioning a mural, but it's going on like a private residence and they've like won a lottery basically for getting a free mural. There are a lot of rules that are around like no advertisements. There can't be any text. There can't be anything that directly ties to the business, or maybe like certain political things are outside of the scope. There's other mural festivals that are activism mural festivals, which want that specifically and want you to imbue it with a very political narrative. So I think that, yeah, we just have a candid conversation about what their values are, what limitations are existing outside of that, and then find a medium um, where everybody's needs are being met. And they also feel like this is something that is going to bring them joy and they're going to interact with on their day to day. And that's really important to me. Like I would never, thankfully, have never had any of my projects painted over because of an issue like that. But yeah, that's something that I just try to communicate very clearly. And but I also am just so eager to do more work that is totally up to me. Because I think that recently I've been leaning a little bit more into the work that is very specific towards the client and with a heavy dose of community programming, which has really gone hand in hand in a beautiful way. Like my style for I should say like my more palatable style, a little bit more corporate style is very graphic. And that is perfect for those paint by number scenarios. If I'm having, kids from a fourth or fifth grade class come in and paint panels with me, that is exactly what they can accomplish and what then I can clean up after them and within a reasonable timeline. But my style, if I was developing something for my portfolio, and my abstract realism style, I have never actually had anybody assist me on anything like that. Like that is, I'm pushing my technique with those projects and my vision. And so I get very protective in that space. And I also am learning actively in real time when I'm doing those murals. They're like rare gems, and I'm excited. Fort Collins mural project, which is coming up, is going to be one of those. That is very much just my vision. Even though it's a collaboration, we kind of have divvied up our own styles in that way. I think they're going to marry really beautifully. But yeah, normally it's just a candid conversation and figuring out the different modalities and needs for the project, the client, and the larger environment that it's going to exist in.
What are you imagining? What are you envisioning for Fort Collins?
So we have a mock-up right now that is two portraits that are facing each other that are kind of one has a more peaceful, I would say like quiet demeanor to her facial expression, and the other one is like upturned, kind of exuding a little bit more energy in that sense. And we wanted their kind of emotion to mirror the style of abstract art that's surrounding both portraits. My collaborator is A.L. Grime, and she does only black and white op art style murals. So very high contrast, very graphic. And so I'm going to really lean into my soft, vibrant gradients and the play between that like black and white and that surreal, vivid color, and then the hard edge and that softness are, I think, is just going to marry so beautifully. It's very balanced. And yeah, there's just a lot of like abstract rolling forms that kind of interact with each other. There's a little bit of asymmetry, and we have some spheres in her style and spheres in my style that are like deconstructing and revealing elements. And yeah, it's going to be crazy. I love it.
I'm thankful for the resonances between the two paintings, how they're almost in dialogue with each other.
Totally.
One of the responses that abstract art often elicits is incomprehension or a desire to work out the specifics of it, to explain it, to sort of make it concrete, to understand it, right? To grasp it, to grasp something that's abstract by definition. How do you respond to that urge in the viewer?
Yeah, I think I get so much of this from my life painting history because that is just like in person, in the moment, first reactions all the time to whatever I'm painting. And I kind of describe it to people. I'm like, I don't if someone asks me like what does this mean, I ask them what it means to them first because I like to hear like it's almost like a psychological trial to see like what are those things called where it's like
The
the ink
Rorschach test,
together
ink
where
blot,
exactly yes it feels very much like that and where I don't have the training to necessarily interpret what that means for that individual. Sometimes it can give me a little bit of a cue or I can ask them to elaborate more. And then I normally just like encourage it. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. And I don't want to ever I used to, I think in the past be like, oh no, that's not what that is. And I think that was a little bit of like an ego thing that would come into play, where I was like, oh, they just don't get it. But then I think that my relationship to abstract art has changed over the years. And now I realize that I might not even get it. And like they could teach me something about what I'm expressing. And a lot of my process is very intuitive and emotionally driven. And so, and in like a broad sense, like not necessarily like a lived experience or anything super specific that is inspiring me, but maybe like more recently, I was working on a series of paintings that were exploring the different ways in which you can transform energy. I was really inspired by the current moment that we're in politically here in the United States and how we're facing a lot of big problems and everyone has their own way of solving them or coping with what we're experiencing, um, and how to make room for multiple solutions to these complex problems. Like there is a warrior and there is a peacemaker and there is somebody that is going to do good in small moments and maybe might not be someone showing up at protests but is volunteering at nonprofits that are being defunded. And so having through abstract art, I've been exploring this concept of like, how can you channel your energy best? Are you explosive and fiery and loud? Is that your gift, or is it something more quiet and subtle? And taking all of those emotions I had around that and putting it into form and color has been really helpful for me and also has allowed me to create dialogue around these issues when other people feel helpless and stuck. I'm like, well, your solution to this problem doesn't have to look like somebody else's solution. And so don't judge yourself for not showing up in that way. Um, and that has been like a really wonderful conversation starter as people have been kind of I let them give their interpretations of what's being seen, and then I kind of cue in. And this is a probably one of the more specific sources of inspiration that I've had for a series of work. So I have had the language around it to kind of engage in more of a conversation. But in the past, sometimes it's been far more amorphous, and I'm still figuring it out as I'm painting it. And so I kind of just let the viewer tell me what they see.
Speaking of language around the painting, around the art, do you tend to also journal or write or try to create blurbs about your content while you're creating it or after it?
I like to do it after. I think about certain themes sometimes, and then often because it's very intuitive, the painting will teach me something or take me in a different direction. And so, especially if I am showcasing it in a gallery, I will do an artist statement and really dive into what I've learned throughout that process. And that has been very beneficial for me to become a little bit more intentional because I think that's something I do want to grow in, which is why I'm excited about this recent series that I've been painting that has so much intention from the beginning. Where in the past, my process has been reversed, where and I think I still do a little bit of both. But yeah, normally I'll do this artist statement for galleries and such. And then aside from that, I think that I like talking to other artists in similar cultural moments and seeing how like I fit into a larger movement because I love studying art history. And so much of that, I think that it's hard to see when you're in it. Like what will somebody say about you as an artist and your role or your contribution to a certain movement of art or like I don't even know what they'll call the movement of art that we're in right now. I think public art is having a moment. And I think that specifically in Colorado, there is like a big movement in psychedelic art as well. But the larger conversations and the more specific conversations around that are still being formed. So I think that going outside of myself to my peers and seeing how we're all moving as a collective has been really interesting.
Part of that historical quagmire, right, of how to define what's going on now or how to look at what went on in the past is that writing it down, etching it in stone, in a way does close it up a little bit. It does define it, classify it, structure it into something that it isn't by nature, right? You were speaking so lovely about how you try to keep things open-ended, and we'll say something to someone, yes, that's also possible. Sure. I wonder how an artist's statement can also embrace that abstract piece, right?
Hmm. Totally leave room for the viewer, I think. And I also never want to alienate anybody. Like I have had many times too, viewers tell me that like they think it's done when I'm maybe at like 70% way. And I've even sold pieces that are like I had greater vision for it, but somebody else saw it and was like, that is perfect the way that it is. Like, and it is perfect for them, like this moment in the universe that they found it. And I think that has been like a wonderful thing to experience and realize that any form of art, as soon as you put it out there, it's outside of you. Like you could actively still be developing it and someone could find it and it's theirs now, and that release and really like challenging moment for the ego has been really freeing and reminds me that I'm channeling something outside of myself and bringing it to whoever it's supposed to belong to.
An important reminder.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about how one of the big influences for you in your work is mental health and your experiences with mental health. How do you see your relationship between your artistic production and process and mental health?
Oh man. I think that art has saved my life on many occasions. I have always struggled with uh, processing cultural cues, just different things that may become easier to people, whether it comes to like making friends, communication, finding community. I always felt like a little bit of a black sheep. And and the way that I process my emotion has also been something that I didn't really have the tools for or language for. And I felt very like othered, there wasn't like a lot of people that I could connect with growing up on that level. And those conversations were certainly not happening within my family. And so finding art was a way to slow down everything that I was feeling and in a way tap into meditation as a tool for healing because I think that when I had tried meditation in its traditional sense by just sitting with my thoughts and my breathing, my neurodivergence would just cause me to end up all over the place. But I think that I've always been the kind of person that if I was doing a repetitive motor task, that is what allowed me to tap into my peace. And that's very much still the reason why at large events, even though I might have a crowd of 5 to 10,000 people around me watching me paint something, and I get a lot of people being like, aren't you scared? Or isn't this like overwhelming and anxious? I have over the, more than a decade of working, cultivated like almost like a trigger of peace that happens when I focus on the details of something. So I love taking that practice into the way that I live life as well. Whenever I get overwhelmed in a public scenario or I'm trying to understand relationship dynamics, platonic, romantic, whatever it is, um, I think that slowing down and focusing on like the core fundamentals of what is going on, whether that in my painting, it's like the current phase of color that I'm developing or value that I'm developing. And in my life, it's like, how do I actually feel about these people? Or like, do they fill my cup? Am I giving back to them equally? Or is this something that's draining me? And understanding the foundation of like a relationship needs to be nourishing and a space needs to be nourishing. And if I'm not aligned in those ways, then it just doesn't have to be for me. And creating those boundaries and not overextending myself has been a wonderful lesson that art has taught me, and has guided my style development, and it has guided my personality development, like, and who I want to end up becoming as I continue to curate myself as a person. I think that, especially as women, we're told that we need to be everything for everyone. We need to be easy, say yes, stay quiet. And I did that for a lot of years and it didn't serve me as it doesn't serve many people. And so becoming like a habitual choice maker in my art has been something that has allowed me to strengthen making boundaries and saying no and protecting my peace and my mental health as an adult. And that's something that has, because it hasn't been present for many years in my young life, I think it's really healing my inner child now to have that in practice.
I'm struck by the resonance between the process in art and the process in psyche
Mhm.
there. How things are unfinished and in process, how uh, one is expected to be a certain way, but also one is taken as one is, right? In those situations where someone would just purchase something in the way it was, even if as it was unfinished. A lot of really ripe similes there to look at. We haven't talked a lot about an important influence for you, which is your Colombian roots. Uh, at the same time, we did talk a little bit earlier off the air about how often artists who come from marginalized communities are reduced to that. And I wonder how you hang in the middle there between an urge to connect with something that is truly a part of you and to not be reduced to that at the same time.
Yeah. I love this conversation so much because I think that a lot of artists, especially that are emerging, need to hear that because we take it upon ourselves as being representatives for our communities to take on so much labor for solving these problems and for creating narratives and representation. And while that is important and I love the opportunities in which I do that still, I think that when it can often become like this blanket over everything that you've ever done, and people start to expect it from you. And I think that's where it becomes it can be a disservice to the artist to pigeonhole them essentially into this role of activist or um this kind of like champion or martyr where they can't express anything else but that identity and the pain that they've experienced. Or um I've I've been very radical against it. And I think that's part of the reason why I leaned into abstract art so much, because it inherently is removed from the representational. So I think one example that I had seen in the past is that like I have seen other artists in similar positions only be asked to do portraits of people of color or portraits of the community that they identify with. And that can become overdone. It can also make us these two-dimensional caricatures of our communities rather than artists that are just as valuable as, Andy Warhol was, and or like can take up as much space as any major artist. I think that it's a big reason why people like Banksy, for example, stay anonymous and just like remove their identity altogether, because I don't know what identity or what community Banksy identifies with, but that is also like a reason why they can just make whatever work they want. And there's not, especially for even being a woman, like there's also, I have artist friends that will use monikers that aren't like obvious about their gender. And so that is a way to like maneuver around some barriers as well. But I think that these conversations still matter. I just think that they can exist in spaces like this, or within community conversation, in artist panels, or just when we're connecting one-on-one with our collectors, or live painting as like I think that it's too nuanced sometimes to only rely on the visual medium for it. And that dimension and complexity comes from these conversations that just have the space for it, and then allow us to be free as artists and just paint for the joy of it sometimes.
Artists being, instead of being any which way, right? Any certain way.
Yeah. I think the best work comes that way, and innovation happens too. And it's inherently adding to the conversation of like what it means to be a Latin immigrant or a Latin artist, especially in the United States. Right now, I think that there has been an extra level of pressure to say something and do something, and to put yourself on that front line. And I do think that that is 100% every single person's responsibility, but I would love for it to become more the responsibility of the people who are in places of more privilege, rather than continue to be on the shoulders of people who have been carrying it their whole lives.
That's real. I'm so thankful for this conversation. I agree that conversations like this one should be happening a little bit more, because there's a lot that's messed up in the way that art is objectified, we could say, on the national scene and international too. I'm so thankful for this conversation.
Me too. Thanks for asking me that.
Thanks for being here. If this conversation resonated with you, consider reviewing Therapy for the World or sharing the link with someone who might appreciate it. Until next time, speak with care and listen deeply.